Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. Congress just held a historic hearing in the Small Business Committee surveying the current state of the creative industry and its overall impact on the American economy. The hearing gathered artists and creative workers led by my guest, Carson Elrod, co-founder of Be an Artist Hero, Arts Workers United, to testify on the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on their industry and ways that Congress can better support the creative economy moving forward. Please welcome my guest, Carson Elrod.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm a lot more relaxed today than I was in the month leading up to yesterday. So I'm in a much better place now.
All right, well, we have to talk about, first of all, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And please talk about this historic hearing which just happened.
Well, I'll tell you what, when we started Be an Arts Hero in June, July of 2020, all we knew is that our industry was on fire. Everything had collapsed. Everyone was out of work, and we were for 15 to 18 months. And for those of us that already lead these kind of precarious lives in the arts, we got together, a couple of us. We started Be an Arts Hero, and when we started it, we were just like, okay, we just know we need help. We're going to call Congress and ask for help. We didn't even know what we were doing or what we were asking for. But then as more and more time went on, we started to look at legislative policy solutions, things that could actually be done, rules, regulations, laws. But one of the things we were thinking about is just the creative economy literacy projects. People don't understand that this is a workforce of 5.2 million Americans worth $919 billion with 673,000 businesses, most of them small, in every single state in the union. And so we thought to ourselves, one of the things we need to be talking about when we talk to policymakers and staffers is a hearing. This is what hearings are all about. Hearings are so policymakers can get people together and have a more robust contemplation of the contours of an individual small business or an industry or a sector so that policy initiatives can be developed. So the intention of this was, let's get together with Congress. Let's talk about the small businesses that make up the creative economy and where we are right now, where we were before the pandemic, which is incredibly powerful, and where we are now, which is very perilous, and where we could be in the future, which is the promise of a great American recovery on the other side of COVID-19 that could be built by arts workers and what we do. And so it was a year and a half of just constantly knocking on doors and asking. We would propose policy initiatives, and we'd say, shouldn't there be a hearing? Shouldn't there be a hearing? Shouldn't there be a hearing? And my representative, Nydia Velasquez, started to say, I think there should be a hearing. And we worked all summer long, and we made it happen. And yesterday, for the first time in the history of the United States Congress, there was a hearing that was just about arts and culture. It wasn't about this little part of arts and culture. It wasn't about this little part. It was about the entirety of the creative economy, where it is, who we are that make it up, and what Congress can do to stabilize us, stimulate us, so that we can help the country build back beautifully.
Yeah. What can Congress do?
Well, there's so many things. What's really exciting is that there's a lot of intrepid, enterprising, very pro-arts, creative, cultural representatives that have, over the course of the last 20 months, introduced a lot. There's more creative economy legislation sitting in Congress now than maybe ever before. Yeah. And it's very exciting. There's stuff like the Creative Economy Revitalization Act, which would give grants to individual arts workers to do public works of art. There's the Arts Education for All Act, which would guarantee arts education for every child in America, pre-K through 12th grade. There's the Create and Place Acts, which are about entrepreneurship and grants and low interest loans dedicated to people in the creative industries. There are I'm trying to think, because there's so many of them. And then, there's also kind of things that would help arts workers out that also would help the larger sector of people that have been impacted by COVID-19. And that's expanded unemployment compensation to make sure that arts workers who, through no fault of themselves, keep finding themselves unemployed are able to have the vital lifeline they need so they can stay arts workers. And that's one of the big arguments that we keep making is this is a group of people, 5.2 million people that contribute 919 billion to the economy. That's 5 times bigger than agriculture. You don't want us to disappear into other industries. So it's really important that there is kind of stabilization so that we can stay here in these creative sectors and keep doing what we do, not just because people enjoy what we do, but because it's so important to anchor dynamic local economies all over the country.
See, that's the interesting thing is a lot of people think, oh, arts, it's just entertainment. We'll get to them later. But no one, like that number you just gave us, the amount of workers and the amount of money that is put back into the economy because of the arts. I mean, talk about the whole halo effect. I mean, someone goes to a live event. It's not just getting a ticket to a show. Talk about the other businesses that do well because of this.
Well, that's exactly right. So we kind of talk about it like in terms of a star. You have like an arts institution, which is a museum or a theater, and it anchors a whole solar system of other industries, which is, parking garages and dry cleaners and hardware stores and bars and coffee shops and restaurants, all of those kinds of things. And the way that those places are stimulated is an arts night out. Somebody may come in and on top of their museum admission or ticket sales, spend quite a lot of money on average across the country. It's 35, but we all know here in New York it can be a lot more money than $35 to go to the restaurant before. Then you have concessions at the show. Then after the show you go to the bar and you take a lift and you've paid a babysitter. So there's all those kinds of things. And, I think about places like Mass Mocha in North Adams, Massachusetts. They had a factory that was closing down. 4,000 jobs were going to be lost. And the mayor and the city planners put together this wild idea of turning that factory into the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, which is now a global destination. And I've spent so much time in the Berkshires at Williamstown, other places, and I've watched as North Adams has had these, breweries and coffee shops and the porches, bed and breakfasts. All of these things have come up to support and orbit around the art star that is Mass Mocha. So if you think about what Congress could do, one of the things that was in the infrastructure package was remediate idle real property. Well, what if Congress earmarked a certain percentage of infrastructure projects to be like, okay, we're gonna take dead factories all over the country and do local versions of Mass Mochas. Well, what you do is you just ignite a little sun in all of these communities. And what's going to happen is the audiences come, the people come, and then, people will start to open up the coffee shops and the restaurants. And it would supercharge an economic recovery.
I love that you worked for such a long time to get this, because I'm sure it was the hardest thing. Like you said, let's have a hearing. Let's have a hearing. They finally gave you one. I mean, this was historic, what you all went through. Talk about some of your cohorts that came with you yesterday and the stories they told.
Yes. Well, yesterday, the other witnesses were Sandra Karras from Actors Equity Association, Nataki Garrett, the artistic director of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and Rayanne Presley from Presley's, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a historic theater in Branson, Missouri. And she and her family, they kind of turned Branson from a 2-lane highway into this mega tourist destination. I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, so I'm very familiar with just how hopping Branson, Missouri is because of its arts and culture sector. And every single one of these witnesses was able to give a unique perspective on different contours of the creative economy. Obviously, Ms. Karras being from a union and myself also being from Actors Equity Association, we leaned into kind of, this is what's going on with arts workers. These are, that's one of the things I forgot to say. The Performing Arts Tax Parity Act is
Yeah.
something that Congress could do, a huge union priority and a priority for our organization as well. So we kind of were in there on behalf of the workers. But what was so great is to hear Ms. Presley and Ms. Garrett talk about their businesses
Yeah.
as anchors of their local economies. I think that Oregon Shakespeare Festival is responsible for something like 25 to 30% of all economic activity in Ashland, Oregon. And the idea is if that festival were to go away, that town would go away. And so when she went to the state legislature in Oregon, and then yesterday to talk about the importance and need of saving these creative institutions, I mean, what more compelling testimony could you give rather than if my theater, if my one business goes down, it turns into a black hole that takes down all the other businesses in this town. That's how important our arts institutions are all across the country.
See, that's what I love, that you had people from all across the United States. So Congress doesn't think, oh, it's New York and it's
Exactly.
Hollywood. You know, they have this mental picture that, oh,
That's
they'll
right.
get through it. But there are cultural and arts centers in every city, in every town across the United States that, like you said, one arts institution helps, you know, 5 other things or 6 other things: restaurants, taxis, babysitters, restaurants, hotels, all this other stuff. I
That's
mean,
right.
it's a big deal.
Yeah, there's not one state in the union that doesn't boast tens of thousands of arts workers generating billions of dollars in value
Yeah.
added to that state's GSP. People do tend to think, oh, it's New York, it's
Yeah.
Hollywood. The arts and culture
Yeah.
sector, the growth rate in Georgia is
Oh,
7.2%, and the national average growth rate of the economy is like 2.1%. So in a state like Georgia, their creative economy is growing almost 4 times faster than any other industry.
yeah.
So I mean, it is all over and everywhere. And if Congress dedicated the resources, the rules, regulations, and really focused this kind of laser beam of stimulus and support to our industries, we are the ones most equipped to build back beautifully on the other side of this. One of the things I said yesterday is, you know, on the other side of the plague was the Renaissance. On the other side of the 1918 flu was the Roaring 20s. The human appetite and need to be in community, sharing space out in the world with each other, participating in these cultural
Yeah.
and artistic events, that appetite is going to be so huge on the other side of this pandemic. And Congress can take advantage of that appetite and use it as you know, as rocket fuel to defibrillate the United States economy.
But you know, the other thing is, all during this pandemic, what saved everybody and kept them just calm were the arts.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I believe there was a study that recently came out. I'm trying to remember what it was, but
Yeah.
like before the pandemic, you know, there was an average rate of like 40% of people, you know, respecting the arts writ large or something
Yeah.
like that. And then after the pandemic, it's like 78%. You know, so it's like people have had a much more intimate relationship with the creative economy during this time. And there is kind of a weird irony there that our sector, which FEMA, Johns Hopkins, Brookings have all said is like one of the hardest hit with the longest road back. We have been the kind of mental health, psychological backbone of people's coping mechanisms and ability to process and peacefully navigate what is one of the hardest times that's ever existed for any of us.
Now, how can regular people get involved? What can they do?
Well, the most important thing that people can do is talk to their representatives and their senators. It's really amazing. I mean, I guess that's one of the things that I think about, right? You think about Washington, D.C., and you think about, you know, lobbyists and cigars and back rooms and secret red phone calls. And I'm sure that happens. But what also happens is a group of distressed arts workers working around the clock for the last year. Like, we made a House hearing happen. We made a historic hearing happen, we have no money. We're all volunteer, and all we do all day is email offices, call offices, and if we, with our small group of distressed arts workers, can make this happen, if a critical mass of people reached out to their representatives and their senators and said, hey, arts and culture are a huge part of my life and our local economy. They need to be stabilized and sustained. And then listed some of those pieces of legislation, it would make a difference. Every single letter counts, every single phone call counts. Anybody here can go to beanartshero.org, and we have pre-populated emails and letters, and we have links that will show you exactly who your representatives are, who your senators are. It gives you their phone numbers. We have a lot of resources for activism at beanartshero.org, so people can go there and check it out. And we would be ever so grateful for people to jump in with us and start making the calls and writing the letters.
Yeah, because that was my last question. How can people go to Be an Arts Hero and find out more of what they can do?
Yeah.
So you're also on all the social platforms too, aren't you?
That's right. You can find us at Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and it's all at Be an Arts Hero. And also, what people can do is they can use their platforms to spread the word, just like you're doing. So when you ask about what people can do, amazing arts heroes like you can do exactly what you're doing, which is give a little time to have this kind of a conversation. This is there will be somebody, even if only one person watches this conversation and they know more about the arts economy than they did before, that will have made a big difference. And I think on a personal note, as an arts worker going into the pandemic, I had a certain feeling about myself and where I existed in society and in the world. Now that I know that my industry is 5 times bigger than agriculture, now that I know that my industry is 250 billion more in value added than all of transportation, now that I know that I'm part of a 5.2 million person workforce that is part of an economic juggernaut, like, it gives me more of a sense of pride about who I am and what I do. And I hope that as people get involved with this advocacy, it fills them with more self-worth as arts workers. The country needs us.
See, I love that, because when I was reading all the statistics and the numbers, I was like, oh my gosh, we work in this business that is bigger than agriculture.
Yes.
I mean, I was
5
fascinated
times bigger.
Yeah. Like I said, the arts has always saved the world. Like you said, during the Renaissance,
That's right.
during, the Depression, during the other pandemics,
Yep.
arts has always saved the world. So I just hope that everybody watching, and like I said, we have millions of viewers here at Broadway World. So if even a small number of them, get involved, please be an arts hero. Call your senators, your representatives. And like I said, I love that your site will tell people
Yes.
who their senators and representatives are, because, that's the only way things get done, is if someone reaches out to their representative and say, I have a vote, I have a voice in this to reelect you. This is what my concerns are in the country right now. But first of all, I'm so proud of what you did, of just putting this whole thing together to have a hearing in front of Congress to present, our side of the story to them and let them know what we need from this. You should be really, really proud of everything you've done and the people you put together to do this.
Thank you very, very much. And I do want to acknowledge, Jenny McHolm, Matthew Lee Earlbach, Jeffrey Omura, Gavin Lodge, Nicole Salter, Whitney Christensen, and everybody who has worked around the clock for the last 6 months to make this happen. And very grateful.
Well, thank you for doing what you do. Carson, thanks for dropping by Broadway World. And everybody, check out Be an Arts Hero and do what you can for the arts.